All right, I think we'll get started. For those that are far back, like lots of spaces up front, so feel free to come up closer to the front if you would like. I'll try not to be blinded by the lights. I'm not used to this. Good evening, and thank you all for remaining for our post-performance panel. For those of you that I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name's Jeremy Steffler, and I'm the Faculty of Mathematics Equity Officer, and it's a privilege to be here today. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. I am, as we heard, our original moderator, Dr. Hilary Berg-Seeger, is not able to attend, and I know she was really looking forward to this, and she passed me along some notes, so I have to thank her for some of the preparation as moderator today. I'm sure everyone's eager to start discussing the performance. I think we'll get started, and we'll do so by passing along the mic to our panelists so they can introduce themselves, starting on my right. And feel free to share your name, how you came to be in your current role at Waterloo, and what trajectory led you here. How did you get here?
Oh, I start first?
Yeah, you do.
Okay, so I'm Anita Layton. I came to Waterloo from North Carolina about 4 years ago. So how do I came to here? I don't know. I guess I really like being here. So forget about how I came here. I'll tell you how I feel about after I got here. I really love being here. So the first person I met, actually before I started my job, was our vice president for research, Charmaine Dean. And I was just talking to her, and I mentioned, some of the EDI initiative that I've done when I was, I'm talking too much. When I was back in North Carolina, and she said, "Oh my goodness, you're interested in that? I need a faculty liaison for this, council that I'm starting. Okay, I'm gonna give you X amount of dollar, and my assistant will help you." I was like, "Are you for real, woman?" Because seriously, I have done this thing for years, and it's always like this. Okay, so I want to host a luncheon for the women in science at Duke, and the first thing I do is go to the dean of the day and ask him or her for money. They are usually not as nice as Mark and Mary. Because I'm insistent, they will give me some money, and so I go on my way. And then I will do a doodle poll myself and find a date for people. I will make sure that they tell me what they want to order. I will call the caterer, and then I will show up half an hour early to make sure everything is set. And then everybody will have their happy meal, and then at the end, because this is a luncheon for women, some of them will stay behind and help me clean up. But here, I actually get a budget and somebody to help me. So I have been very happy at Waterloo, and I will stop here.
Hi everyone, my name's Maliha. I'm a third-year PhD student in applied math. I've been associated with WIM at UW for the last, I want to say 4 years now, ever since my time as a graduate student here, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion tonight.
I think I have one here. Hi everyone, my name is Andrea. I am a fourth-year mechatronics engineering student, and currently also the founder and president of the Women in Engineering Undergraduate Student Association. And I think I started this organization just from the sheer need of having an organization that's run by students for students. And we've kind of grown that organization into 20 dedicated leaders who I'm very proud of. My directors are my pride and joy. And I'm very excited to be here today.
Hello, I'm Ryan Consul. I'm an instructor with First Year Engineering. How did I get here? Once upon a time, I started engineering undergrad here and believed that I was going to be an engineer, and then co-op informed me that I hated it. And then another co-op term let me teach, and then it turned out I loved teaching. So I'm very honored to be here and delighted that Waterloo lets me teach their first-year students and trust me with them. And also, I should say that I'm filling in for Jeremy Steffler, who had to step away from this position for some important moderator duties.
Well, I think people know who Joya is. Yeah. Thank you so much. So, in watching the play, I know there were some things that I resonated with, seeing what had happened to colleagues and in supporting colleagues at the time I was studying at Waterloo. And I'm wondering, in watching the play, was there anything that resonated for you in references to your experiences as students? And I'll kind of put, I see a nodding of a head at the end, but anyone want to take a stab at that one?
I can start things
Sure.
off. I think, funny enough, like this was like a post-grad, like master's, PhD play, but there are so many parallels between that and an undergraduate experience. Like there were so many characters I was like, yeah, that kid was in my class. Yeah, that professor, yeah, I know him very, very well. So I saw all those parallels, and I think it's very telling of, the fact that even now in STEM education, we still get to see some of these experiences. I think to a certain extent, I have been very fortunate to have had a great group of mentors and support, and like have those, I would say, acquaintances and friends that have really helped me through through the years that I've been here at Waterloo for the last 4 years. But I think it's just very interesting to see how these things still exist. And I have a little sister who's coming in through engineering as well. And I have a feeling that in a couple of weeks from now, and probably already, even though she hasn't told me yet, she'll probably find these characters as well. So I'm really hoping that, in the upcoming years or so, that we can finally sort of start to see these characters disappear from our lives. That's like my hope in the future. But I thought it's crazy to know that things that were happening in the past are still happening today, even if it is just maybe a little bit better right now. But yeah.
I could add a few points to that. I think, starting off with the windowless math building and math offices in MC. Besides that, I think right off the bat, when you mentioned innate differences in abilities, I think that's something that has been kind of a highlight since, I would say, since undergrad days. I know that people will often bring up the conversation and say, that women have to work much harder, and it's almost seen as a bad thing. And so there definitely have been many points during your play that really did resonate, and I second what you said.
Yeah, and as I was watching the play with, being an equity officer, I'm obviously thinking of the whole gender bias, a term that we hear a lot about, but sometimes we don't see it because we're blinded, especially if we don't have that lived experience. And it's a term that's used. If you look it up in the dictionaries or online, it talks about treating people differently due to a real or perceived gender identity. And Dr. Bergsinger shared with us in a conversation a really interesting analogy, and she said that she describes it as when we let gender stereotypes leak out into how we treat people. It can be subtle, but ultimately results in unequal, disparate treatment of individuals. And I think that in the performance you just done, I should mention, we've all seen it for the first time. And so we're seeing it for the first time, like many, or maybe all of you here today. And I was struck by the not so subtle, portrayals, but yet stories that I've heard from others, the description of meeting with supervisors and then saying, well, is this really what you want to do? Don't you need to focus on family or children? That's not the first time I've heard that. And we think about the generations that we've had come through. So I'm wondering, for our panelists, from your experience, have you seen instances of gender bias that you, in the play, in your own work, or the work you've had with students?
Where do I start?
Now we do have a time limit.
I
Yeah, okay,
understand. So I'll give you the most recent, a rather subtle, talking with my phone because I do want to look something up. A rather subtle example, a very recent one. So, I didn't introduce me with many titles, so I'm not exactly a student. And I view myself as being quite established. So because I'm that established, a couple of months ago, Waterloo Magazine wanted to interview me. So they hired a freelancer who wrote the piece on William Tutt, as you know. Okay, it was a very beautiful piece. So, okay, I got interviewed, no problem. So I had a very pleasant conversation with her for an hour, talk about, family life, work, and stuff. And then a few weeks later, she sent me a draft. I read it, and I didn't like it. And I couldn't put my finger on why I didn't like it. So I just don't feel right. It talks about, work and also my family life, which included the fact that my husband has Alzheimer's in long-term care home. So I didn't know what to do about it. I just don't like it. I like how the play talk about having allies and friends are important. So I sent a piece to a friend and asked him what he thinks. So he said, I hate it. Look at this. Look at the William Tutt piece. Okay, the guy is described as brilliant. What is this piece described? You asked forthright and practical wife. So basically, I was actually introduced not as the Canada 150 researcher. I was introduced as the wife of my husband, by the way. So it doesn't stop after you got a PhD, by the way. Doesn't stop after you got promoted to full professor. Doesn't stop ever. So and then it's after on the 4th page where my research was finally introduced. Basically, as a background, that I'm still successful despite all the family work that I have to do. So that was the piece, and it was written by a woman. Seemingly, had a very pleasant conversation with me. So I decided to write her boss or whoever that hired her. And if you know me, I'm not too afraid to throw away all my accolades and stuff. So I read all of these things just in the last 2 years, and now this is how you wrote about me. They actually, I was very surprised that they were not defensive. I was actually pleasantly surprised. Usually with these things they are very defensive. They were not defensive, and they rewrote it. So the Waterloo magazine piece that you will see at some point in the fall, you can look at it. And if you ever look, if you want the first draft, I'm happy to share it. That was actually, I thought about, actually my friend told me, this will be a very good, like a thing that you do workshop, this will be the good example, but it's so ridiculous, people will think it made it up. So I'm happy to share that one with you. So what I'm saying is having friends that you can, share your struggle with, or, just to, I don't know, get a second opinion of your reaction is very good. And struggle doesn't end when you get old. You just need to stand up for yourself, which I have learned how to.
Anyone else have something that resonated at all?
So I teach first year, and I get to watch first years and how their gender bias leaks out. We had a class a couple weeks ago where they were doing some group work, and then they got into larger groups, and there was a very strong trend as to how much speaking you did in relation to your height. So if you're over 6 feet, you're probably doing 90% of the speaking. And if you're closer to 5, you probably can't even see the people speaking. It's painful.
So, one of the things you said, you also described not just an incident, but also approaches that could be taken or steps you took to try to address it. And I wonder if it's worth exploring that a bit as a panel. We've seen things in the play that we resonated with. What are ways that we can work to start to overcome gender bias or support one another, support each other as we encounter it? And how do we name it? And how do we change it? So I'm curious as to, you mentioned allies and connecting with individuals. Any other thoughts on, what we can do? What are some strategies that we can take? And feel free to jump in at any time too.
I think one of the things that you mentioned, your friendship with Sandy and being able to talk math with other women. I think that's something that spaces like women create spaces like that, and I really appreciate that. And I'm also grateful for all the women in my in my office and in the department that I can feel comfortable to speak math with. And I definitely feel less intimidated and more confident when I get that opportunity. And
I'll add on to that because recently, right before this term started, one of the girls in my class, she was like, "Hey, Andrea, I really want to get all the girls together. we haven't bonded because, you know, the pandemic has taken a toll. We haven't had the chance to connect. And so we recently started this group chat, which was a great group chat to be in, because we started getting all of these like questions and floods of, you know, we hadn't really talked to each other previously. We had our small friend groups here and there, but we kind of built that group out. And so as one person, she mentioned, you know, does anybody ever feel stressed by the fact that they're the only woman on their team? And then that led to the floodgates of like, oh, I had that. That's me right now, dealing with it right here. And I think just having that, like those friends to, you know, complain in a sense and be like, somebody actually resonates with me. Because I myself have been the only female in pretty much every team that I have ever done my internships or my co-ops in. And sometimes it's hard to, you know, like they don't really understand it. And so like the importance of, you know, having that friend group, having those people that you can kind of talk to, that they can relate to you, that they can give you advice. And so there was, I think somebody was dealing with a little issue. And, you know, sometimes you just need that little bit of confidence, that push from that person next to you to say, you should really say something and you should go for it. And that person actually stood up and, you know, reported whatever they were dealing with, and it ended up being like a very successful, like they were able to get it resolved, and they were able to get the support that they needed. So I think having that friendship, having that group of people is so important, and having those allies. And sometimes, you know, for me, those allies have been my engineers on the last internship that I was in, because there were some issues during the last internship that I was in, and those guy engineers, all 5 of them, had my back. So I'm telling you now, those engineers are great guys. So whether it's females, whoever it might be, finding that group of people to support you and to, you know, really stick up for you and give you that little bit of oomph really does help and goes a long way.
Thank you so much. Really great insights. A question I know I've been dying to ask since seeing the performance, Joya, is how has MIT responded to the play?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I created the play and I was premiering it in a workshop format at the Fringe Festival in New York, I was terrified that MIT would sue me. And so I ran to the volunteer lawyers for the arts in New York to talk to someone. And he said, if MIT sued you, that would be the very best thing that ever happened to your career. So don't worry. But I was still worried. And then right after the Fringe, there was a theater that's a 10-minute walk from MIT that booked me for the show. And there was an article about the show in the paper, and the MIT math department was so concerned that they called a special departmental meeting to discuss it. And then they came to see the play, and then they actually liked it, so they came back quite a bit and brought their friends and family. So that worked out. But then a couple years later, the MIT had a celebration for its 150th anniversary. And so they invited me to come perform at MIT on campus, and they built me a theater. They built me a theater for this, which was kind of incredible. So the last thing I ever would have expected.
That's amazing. And did the theater have a number? I just had to ask. No. So that's an amazing response, and I think it shows hopefully capacity for change and to start making differences. A theme that I really appreciate, and I think I'll be thinking about for quite some time, is how people might change or suppress identity to fit in. You talked about some of your female colleagues and the initial reception, and I wonder, with our panelists, if there are individuals looking to study pursue STEM fields, engineering or mathematics, what would be your advice for how do you maintain the sense of female identity, however they define it, within these fields? How do you balance the role as a scientist, an engineer, a mathematician, and navigate that? I know that's a heavy question, but I'm curious to know your thoughts. What advice would you give to people?
So I think I went into this field because this is what I want. It doesn't matter whether you're in STEM or humanities or whatever, right? If you lose your identity, what the heck are you? I think, which is not to say you never change yourself to fit in. That is very unrealistic. So I'm a very practical person. The way I interact with people professionally can be very different from how I interact with people in private, right? So telling people that, okay, don't do anything to fit in, I find it extremely impractical. So everybody, you should ask yourself, where do you draw the line? And that line might change as you grow.
So I watch our first years come in, and every single one of them doesn't know who they're supposed to be in the room. So I'm sharing with, I know there's a lot of educators in this room, so hi. And one of the things we try to do in the labs that we run is give them some space to be weird and to be weird in front of them and to be strange human beings. And that lets the very conservative, tightly held, pretending to belong in whatever they imagine this space to be, they loosen a little bit, and then they start to talk to each other as themselves instead of the chameleon. It's a way to start. It's something we can do in classrooms.
I think that is something that, when I first came to Waterloo during my master's, I think that was something that I had to think consciously about, because I was in a group of very studious and very quiet, they liked being in their zone kind of people. And I would feel or think twice before, I wanted, even if it was something like, okay, let's do a puzzle together, like jigsaw puzzles. And we would have a puzzle corner or a puzzle desk. And it just felt like, even a small thing like that felt like, should I not be doing this? Am I gonna look less serious than the others? Until, it kind of normalizes the environment enough for others to feel like, okay, they can also do other things besides just staring at their computer and their textbooks and notebooks.
Tell a joke.
I mean, we would do more fun stuff afterwards, but yeah.
And then I'm wondering what role do performances like this or discussions like this have in kind of setting that change or creating the space for these types of conversations? I wonder, Joya, like you've done this performance numerous times, how many people have reached out to share, the impact performances like this can have?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I think we're getting close, way over 100 performances and close to 100 talks like this. And then there's the thing that I've always called the discussion after the discussion, which is the more personal talk, where people really let their hair down and then talk about more things. So I think, I've just noticed that's part of why I persist in doing this, is that I think to create conversations around art is just one of the best things in life. And so that's why I do it. I think we need to talk more.
Yeah. Can't add anything to that. I think it's good. So I'm just going to check, how are we doing time-wise, our time? We still have 8 minutes. Oh, there we go. All right. So one of the, when discussing gender equity, there's often a talk about what I sort of say like a critical mass. How do you, at what point I'll just read my notes. I get this question right here. What is the effect of having a critical mass of women faculty and students on the climate and reputation of an institution or a department? And does that change depending upon the discipline? So think about when we look at we do a lot of data on demographics, what percentage of faculty, what percentage of students, what role does that play on the acceptance, or what role does that play on promoting gender equity or the environment?
So I'll start with faculty first. Back when I was at Duke, I was the only tenure-track female prof for maybe 10, 20 years, quite a while. So I think it does have it has some problem. Number one, when there is, diverse committee is always a need. And so I would say if you go back 15 years ago, I didn't think much about EDI at all. That was not, I don't think about it. The moment I realized it's important was when I saw, I was a faculty member, and when I saw the grad student, the women grad student, looking around, and so there was a hiring season, so there was 8 person invited for the job interview for a tenure-track position, and 8 of them were men, 7 white men, and then there was an Asian guy. So I find how depressing that seemed to be for the grad student. I think I was old enough that it seemed normal to me. It didn't hit me as anything abnormal whatsoever. I'm always the only one, and I don't care. Because if I did care, I would have dropped out already. So it was a selection thing there, right? So I think that was the moment when I realized it is actually important. So when you don't have a critical mass, who do people look up to, right? So you need to have critical mass and enough role model and mentors, and then you can talk about, how about attracting or retaining more women in STEM field? They go to their first intro class, and the instructor, or 4 out of the 5 classes, instructor that they don't identify with, right? So that is an issue as well.
I was just going to say that it's hard to imagine yourself. We can only become what we can imagine ourselves being. And it's difficult to imagine yourself in a position where there's nobody like you. And so in whatever group you belong to, if you walk into a room and nobody like you is there, it's hard to imagine that you have a place in there. And to even strive for something you can't imagine is sort of closed to you the moment that you see that room that you don't feel like you belong in. And so having a device, I think I've over-explained myself. I'll stop.
I was just going to add that, I think it makes a huge difference. I don't think I would have chosen applied math, and I don't know how different my academic trajectory would have been if I hadn't chosen applied math. And the only reason that happened really was because of the conversations I had with one of my female math professors back in undergrad. And I think I've really been fortunate to have seen so many or been taught by many female math professors, and that really has had a huge impact. And I know that might not be the case for many in the audience, but I really do feel grateful that I had that influence, be it grade 8, grade 10, grade 11 even. I had those role models to look up to, and I knew that, okay, I want to be an educator like this teacher or this professor. And really the only reason I got into applied math was because of my professor in undergrad.
It's funny enough, I'm doing a STEM consultation with different countries across the world with the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, and I've been doing some data analysis and some number crunching over the last 3 weeks. And something that I found funny, or not funny, but something that I noticed was that even women who are out there, who are leaders of these Girl Guide units and are working with youth, a big reason why they don't see or they feel like women aren't going into STEM is because they themselves they're not in STEM. And so they're seeing that the youth aren't seeing themselves in these other individuals, and that is why that's one of the biggest factors from the long list of different factors we gave them as to like, why do you think your youth aren't going into STEM fields? They're like, well, we ourselves aren't in STEM, and therefore we don't feel comfortable or we don't feel like we can share that love of STEM with them. And so it's like, okay, but we want to do that. We want to empower them with like the love and give them the knowledge and understanding. And so a part of our organization that I volunteer with WAGS, is about, how can we build up leaders so that they feel confident to deliver STEM programming? And this is a different take on it, but I think it goes to show that even across the world, it's something that is consistent across pretty much every single country that filled out our survey said was that because girls aren't seeing themselves in their professors, their teachers, their role models, their family members, they are just not going into STEM. And so I think from us, if we, as students, like, we were very lucky. I myself was also very lucky to have had a family that was very much, we love STEM, so here you go. So you're gonna also do STEM. But I think if you're not brought up in, or if you don't see those role models from a very early age, or even, going up through high school and going into university, you might not be able to, see yourself in that position. So I think seeing yourself there is so, so important. And then having those role models around you is also very, very important.